Hello, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now, the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to shake things up. Y'all, I'm so excited tonight to have Jeffrey Madoff on. You may not be familiar with his name, but I guarantee you are familiar with the global brands that he has worked with. Plus, he is the author of the book Creative Careers. And I am just so excited to have you on here, Jeffrey. The thing that I love about you, as I mentioned earlier, you're this kid from Wisconsin. You know, it's not like you just had your road paved for you to just go out and do stuff. You made your own way, and everything has been based on your own ideas. So, welcome to the show. And to get us started, I want you to fill the audience in a little bit on your background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Lisa. And I'm actually a kid from Ohio.
You went to college.
But I went to college.
Okay.
Yes. I went to college in Wisconsin,
Okay.
in Madison. I had a double major in philosophy and psychology because I wanted to choose two majors that would prevent me from getting any kind of a good paying job. And I succeeded, by the way. So my college prep was for not getting hired, and I succeeded in doing that. And I became an entrepreneur basically because I'm unemployable. And therefore, I had to start my own business because I like to buy things and do things, and that costs money.
And you like to eat sometimes.
I like to eat
Yeah.
sometimes. That's right. Regular intervals. At least have the option to eat.
Yeah.
That's right. And, my parents were entrepreneurs. My mom and dad had retail stores in Akron. My sister Janice has a retail store in South Carolina.
Oh.
And so it was interesting because I never thought of myself as being an entrepreneur necessarily because that was the normal that I grew up with.
Yeah.
Hearing my mom and dad talk about business. I worked in the store like during the Christmas season and so on when they were getting in merchandise, and I'd receive it and I'd have to match it up to the invoices and the packing lists and all that kind of stuff. My sister was really good and she took to that and ended up opening up her own store in South Carolina. But entrepreneurial thinking, I never thought of it, oh, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It was just, it made sense to me to always start my own businesses, which I had done since the time I was a little kid. A movie theater in the basement when I was like 12 or so, 12. And that was really good because we sold popcorn. And because my dad used to buy these drums of popcorn, and I would take the lunch bags, fill them with the popcorn, and sell them very low overhead because I never paid my dad for the popcorn. So that was 100% profit. Yes. Actually, I never even paid for those sandwich bags either. My mom bought them for my school lunch. I hadn't thought about that before. If I could somehow find a sponsor so I had no overhead, that would be that would be great. So, I did a lot of different things. Every time it snowed, that was an opportunity to make some money going door to door, shoveling driveways. In the summer, it was mowing lawns, having a paper route. I mean, very normal Midwestern pursuits, but there are things that taught you how to do things, value your time, value your labor.
Yeah.
And with a paper route, it was also, I had to buy the newspapers. So I was like buying them at wholesale and selling them at retail. I'd have to bill the clients and collect the money. So it all was kind of just the way I was brought up and the way I lived. There was no master plan going on.
Yeah. Well, I love, you mentioned to me one time, because, hey, y'all, Jeffrey's in the book, Disrupt Your Now. So shameless plug there. But when we were talking about that, you told me, look, if you're looking for like a 5-step plan, I'm not one of those people that gets up in the morning with a plan. And that cracked me up because that's how I am. So it's not like you were just like, this is my life and these are the things I'm going to do. You followed your heart, right? And your head.
Yeah. I am not a believer in recipes for success. There are best practices.
Yeah.
But that's different.
Right.
But it's not. And there's what I call the myth of replication, which is somehow if you do what that millionaire next door did or something, you too will be a millionaire. No, you won't be.
Yeah.
You can't replicate somebody else's life. They're different than you are. Their circumstances are different than you are. The people they encounter are different than you are. And so maybe there's some things you can learn, but there's no 5, 7, or 10 step process that's going to guarantee your success.
Yeah. And that's such a great point. And so many people who start businesses look at the people that they admire and they want their money or whatever. And they don't stop to think, do I have what it takes to get, to achieve what they have? But also, do I really even want what they have? Because they're not thinking about what it takes to run a business and all of that. And so what happens is, in my experience, I've seen so many people throughout the years that try to go by that recipe and do what other people are doing. And even if they are really successful, they end up miserable because they're living what somebody else wanted, not necessarily what they wanted. So you've marched to the beat of your own drum, basically your entire adult career, right?
Yeah. When you say my adult career, it sounds like I was in porn.
No. Well, if you were, I didn't know it. Maybe I need to go Google that.
I think that you raise a very important issue, and it's something that I ask my guests that I have in my class every week. And I also ask my students, which is, what is success for you? Most people don't ask themselves what success means and what is success. And so it becomes this thing that they think it's quantifiable. Like if I have X amount of dollars, that, I'm successful. And what is success? And is there a difference between success and fulfillment? Can you make them the same thing? You need to make money, but what are you willing to give up to get it? What are you willing to do to get it? And I think that the notion of defining success is really important. How do you define that for yourself? And I think a lot of people don't ask that question until they're well into middle age and they feel it's too late. And they've created this kind of golden handcuffs for themselves because they don't know, they don't know what the risk is involved in changing careers. And that's frightening because it's the unknown. And, the question arises, and I ask my students this: if you made a lot of money, or if you're making a lot of money, yet you hate what you're doing every day at work, are you successful?
Right.
And I would argue that you're not.
That's right. Yeah, so you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have what you want, and I'm not talking things, if you have nothing you want, but you have all the money in the world, you are a failure. In my opinion. Maybe to somebody else they wouldn't be, in my opinion.
To me, I always thought about, when I was a kid, I'd get asked a question. So if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? And I would think about, well, that would actually screw up the entire global economic system. And if I had all the money in the world, where would I even put it? And what could you do? Because nobody else had any, because I had all the money in the world. So I would spiral off into that world. But I think that it's important to take what amounts to a fairly deep dive into who you are.
Yes.
What gets you excited? What is it that you love doing? What did you like doing when you were a kid? Is there a way to make a living in some iteration of that as you get older? I knew I didn't want to continue to mow lawns or shovel driveways, but as I did things that involved some of my creative skills with writing or with drawing, storytelling, those kinds of things, fooling around with, our home movie camera, which at that time was an 8mm camera. Things that I liked playing with, because, and it's, I guess, not a coincidence that I'm doing a play, and that's a new business for me. But what do you enjoy doing? What is it? How do you want to spend your time? Because it's not like, you shouldn't feel like you're kind of in prison for those many hours that you work during the day. And so if you do want to start your own business, which you are absolutely right, most people don't know how much work it is. It's a lot of work. It's a roller coaster ride. And, we were talking about the recipes for success, which I don't think there are any beyond the best practices. But what I do think is the case is you have to have that ability to persevere.
Yeah.
Perseverance and putting up with the ups and downs and obstacles you're going to inevitably confront is essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People look at the very successful entrepreneurs and they have no clue how they're walking that precipice all the time. You never know when you're going to fall over. And it can be extremely stressful. But when you're used to living that life and you're doing something that you love, like I cannot imagine sitting behind a desk and working in a corporation anymore. I did it. The last job I had like that was in the 80s. And I'm like, I'm a terrible employee. My degree was in accounting. I was a CPA, so it would be easy to get a job. But I found that I hated it, didn't like the kind of people I worked with, and I was just miserable. I would much rather work more and be stressed and always be able to explore and do different things than the drudgery of the same thing day after day and year after year.
Right. But I will say that, your loves, let's just say you loved painting or you loved taking dance classes or whatever, and that satisfied something in you that was never going to come from your job.
Right.
There's nothing the matter with having a job that compensates you well, and you use that compensation to basically sponsor the things that you'd like to be doing.
Great point.
And I think that's really important. Not everybody is an entrepreneur. And a good percentage of those who are entrepreneurs probably shouldn't be, because it puts too much stress on their life, on their marriage, on whatever. And there are options, and it depends on how you look at what you're doing. So there are things that can be wonderful hobbies that can bring you a lot of satisfaction, a lot of fulfillment, and making a living at it may not be part of the picture. But if you've got a job that values you, that pays you well, and you can do those things, that's great.
Yeah, that way you have best of both worlds.
That's right. That's right.
So tell the audience about your very first business out of college.
Oh, well, when I was in college, I was, and this is a much lesser deal than it sounds like. I was the buyer for a small boutique. The guy that started it was just a few years older than I. And it's the kind of place that we sold back in those days, bell-bottom blue jeans. And at the checkout counter, you could buy rolling papers and hash pipes. And it was a neat store, because also Madison, being a major college town, got major bands coming through. And since I was a buyer and I would always find unique stuff to sell in the store, that was a lot of fun. It was like this amazing scavenger hunt that I would go on every time I came to New York. I would find new resources and new stuff that, this could be cool. And because the guy that started the store didn't know what he was doing, I could basically do whatever I wanted. And that was fun. And that was really fun. When I graduated, I continued to work there. And one day I got a call from a dear friend of mine. His mother and my mother grew up together. So I don't remember ever not knowing him.
Yeah.
Right? And we're still friends to this day. Kenny Meerman, this dear friend of mine. And he said, he had graduated from college a year before me in Arizona. And he said, listen, I've saved up some money. Can you think of something that would earn more than bank interest? And I said, well, I see what we're selling in here. I could always draw. I'll start a clothing company. And it was literally that well thought out. And so he said, okay. And the memory is hazy. I think
it had nothing to do with those rolling papers, right?
Nothing to do with that. It was actually who was loaning who the money, or actually he didn't loan me the money, he invested it. And so I can't remember if it was 1,500 or 2,500, but whatever it was, like that, it was gone, which seemed like a lot of money at the time, by the way. When I'd never had that much money in my banking account at that time. And I was ignorant, naive, but I wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
So if you're ignorant, you can learn. If you're stupid, that's forever. And so I was able to learn. And the thing that was interesting about that learning, it wasn't like somebody took me in under their wing.
Yeah.
It was survival. So I had to learn quick or I was going to die in that business.
Mm-hmm.
And so the business grew very rapidly. Every 4 months, I was doubling the business. Within a year and a half, I had about 120 employees, an office at the Empire State Building, 7 salesmen across the country.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there was, and it was a tremendous, tremendous learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I realized that everything you do informs everything else you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about, you know, and you think about this stuff as you look back, as you're doing it, you may not realize it. But when I looked back, I realized, so, you know, when I had a paper route, I had to figure out what time are the papers delivered? When do I have to have them delivered by? How many do I need to buy to satisfy my subscribers? How much is it going to cost me to buy the papers? How quickly can I get paid? So as I mentioned earlier, it's wholesale and retail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the clothing business. The difference was I was also creating the product. I wasn't just buying wholesale. It added a whole new level. I had to create something. So I had to have an idea of the kind of clothes I wanted to design, be able to communicate that idea by sketching it out, by finding fabrics that I liked, by finding sewers that could make patterns and do it. But the essence was the same as how much of the raw materials, how much is the labor, when can it be delivered, how much can I sell, when do I have to deliver it by, how much can I charge, and how do I collect?
Yep.
And that extra layer of also creating the product rather than buying something wholesale and selling it at a markup is what I've done ever since with my film work, with doing the play, with writing a book, you know, creating that product that I did. But the protocols of businesses are essentially the same. If you take away the jargon,
yeah,
you know, what you need to know is the same in any business.
Yeah, so true. And then you throw on top how fickle the apparel industry is.
Yes.
The fact that you were so successful so quickly is amazing. And
well, one of the things that happen, and this is important for all the entrepreneurs in the audience, is that I took a few of my designs and some of the sewers who did alterations for the store, I had them make the clothes.
Okay.
So we had about a dozen pieces and they sold out in an afternoon.
Wow.
So had them make like 18 pieces, they sold out in a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, okay, I'm going to design a line. I'm going to have like 12 or 15 styles, have samples put together. I did that. Put them in a suitcase, strapped it on the back of my motorcycle, drove from Madison to Chicago, and I sold to, I think, 14 of the 19 stores I went to or something.
Wow.
Like that. And all of a sudden I had like $55,000 in orders, which was a lot.
That was a lot, especially back then.
And I was clueless in terms of, well, how's I actually going to get this made?
Uh-huh.
You know, it's one thing to be making couple dozen pieces with a few sewers. It's quite another thing when I needed, you know, hundreds of garments, thousands of garments eventually.
Yeah.
So that was quite a learning experience, but it was great because it taught me to be resourceful. And, you know, I think when your survival is what the stakes are, you need to learn pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know, so it was really interesting. But if you pay attention to what you do, it informs everything else you do. And the point I wanted to make to the other entrepreneurs is that selling first those 12, then those 18, then those 15 stores gave me something that's also essential for business, which is a proof of concept.
So true. Yeah.
You know, that we knew it wasn't friends saying, oh, those are nice. It was people who write checks or give you cash or hand over the credit card to the cashier. You know, people who I didn't know who were willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and you didn't say, okay, I've got this investor. I'm going to start this business. I'm going to design these things. I'm going to go make thousands of pieces and then hope somebody buys it.
No.
Yeah.
Inventory is the rocks that sink the body of your business to the bottom of the river.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want excess inventory.
For
And,
sure.
a sale can be a good deal for the consumer, but it hurts the business.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, proof of concept, whether you're making an app, whether you are designing clothes, whether you're starting a coaching business that people are willing to pay and then resubscribe to your service, or the play that I'm doing, people have to buy tickets. That's the only way you truly have something viable, is if people are willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're doing that play now. Tell us about that. I think it's just so fun to think about that. That's something that you've been wanting to do for quite a while, right?
Well, I didn't know I wanted to do it, really. I'm seduced by ideas,
Okay.
which can be a really good thing. It can also be a difficult thing, because something's got to give somewhere when, you have to learn to say no to certain things. But, and it's not like I wasn't busy until I was doing the play. I was quite busy. But what happened is that I had done a job for Radio City Music Hall. There's a film for their 75th anniversary that was part of their Christmas spectacular. Okay. So the film that I did preceded some donkeys and camels and a manger scene on the stage at Radio City. And it was fun to do. The executive producer, a man named John Bonanni, a great guy. We became good friends as a result of working together. He left Radio City and he called me, and he had been in theater before. And he called me and he said, look, I'm with somebody. Do you know the name Lloyd Price? I said, sure, Mr. Personality. Mm-hmm. He said, yeah. And I said, I don't know anything about him, but I know his music. I loved his music when I was a kid. And he said, well, I want you two to meet. I think there's something here, and I want you two to meet. And what he wanted me to do was to meet Lloyd and see if I was willing to do a documentary about him, because they wanted to raise his profile and hopefully generate something as a result of that. Yeah. Lloyd was, and this is back around probably at this point about 8 years ago. Okay. And Lloyd and I became dear friends. When I was working on the documentary, I researched him and I had no idea of anything about his life, which was astounding. One of the first things he did, and this wasn't a conscious effort, it was a byproduct of what he did, is that his first song, Lawdy Miss Clawdy, which has been covered by everybody. It was covered by the Beatles, by Elvis, by Little Richard, by Fats Domino, on and on and on. That was the first record by a teenager that sold over 1 million copies.
Wow.
And as a result of that, which was in 1952, it broke on the wall that was called race records, because if you wanted to buy a record by a black artist, you had to go to a black-owned record store. Okay. So nobody's prejudiced against green. Everybody wants money, right? Yeah. So it was really interesting, the impact Lloyd's music had. And then he was the first musician of any color to start his own label. Wow. No artist had started their own label before. And he taught Sam Cooke how to do it. That's the model that Frank Sinatra ultimately used to get his label going. And that started with Lloyd. And then he was the first black person to open up a nightclub below Harlem. Wow. Across the street from where the Ed Sullivan Theater is, which is where the Colbert Show is broadcast from. So he had an amazing life, and he was an incredible person. And something I get to say, Lisa, which I love saying just because I think it's really cool, is that I was on a conference call with Lloyd Price and Little Richard. So I thought, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. That's awesome.
And I learned so much, not just about music, but about race, about racism, about the music business, about celebrity and fame. And when I did the documentary, I was so seduced by Lloyd's life and what he experienced, and getting to know him. And the way that we hit it off and became such good friends. And I said to him, I know I can capture your voice. I want to tell your story. This is an amazing story. And then we get to the point back to entrepreneurship again, because mounting a play is like it's starting a new business.
Yeah.
And it's literally starting a new business. You have to get financing unless you have enough money yourself. I had to get financing. And, you raise money, you're creating a product, you're trying to get it out there, get paid by people buying tickets to come see it. And it's a whole process and not a quick one. But I have gotten great fulfillment from doing it. And we had our first commercial run this past March at People's Light Theater in Pennsylvania. Went incredibly well. We got fantastic reviews. Word of mouth, the show started selling out, and it was really cool. And that has led us to the point where we're going to be opening in Chicago in spring of 23.
Oh, that's so cool. My son lives there, so I can't wait to let him know when you open there. That's amazing.
Well, that you should let him know in person so you can see it too. You should.
Yes, I do. I do need to do that.
That's right.
So you did the documentary, and
Yes.
then okay, so you did do both.
And that led me to what I learned from doing the documentary about Lloyd is what led me to want to do a play.
Okay. And, I don't know anything about producing play, know a little bit, just business side. Well, obviously you got to do this, this, and this, but I never even thought of just the few things that you said now. Somebody like me who's never had to be involved in that, you wouldn't think that. You'd be like, oh, you write the play, you go get people, you get actors, and you go do it. We don't think about all the stuff that has to go on behind the scenes with the money and everything.
Right. No, that's right. I didn't know either, but again, background.
You were ignorant, but you were able to learn. You weren't stupid.
And by that time, having experience doing as many productions as I had done.
Yeah.
I've worked with set designers, worked with lighting designers, worked with costume designers, worked with musicians, worked with actors, filming it, not doing it on a stage.
Yeah.
But, a lot of the skills and talents that I had developed through my production company were directly applicable to what I was doing in the play.
Yeah. Great. And so that's a great example for y'all to think about, that the things that Jeffrey does, everything builds on each other. He's learning the whole way and figuring out how, from the paper route to the play, you're learning lessons and figuring out how they fit into different businesses.
And we all, if our eyes are open, can learn those things.
Yeah.
And just, it's about being present. Pay attention to what you're doing and think about what you've done in the past that is applicable, because it also makes the possibilities of doing things much more realistic. It's because you aren't paralyzed by, God, I don't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. And, I guess it's both a blessing and a curse. More of a blessing that I never cared if I didn't know anything about something. If I was interested, I didn't know anything about filmmaking until I started my company.
Yeah.
So it's, learning on the go, so to speak. I found that I can thrive in that kind of environment. Now, never been hired, to do any of this stuff, but
well, you were hired by clients.
That's right.
You weren't hired by a company as an employee.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah. So tell us how you got into the video production stuff.
Well,
because you went from apparel.
We're going to do them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You went from apparel to videography, right?
Yes. Yeah. And actually I was doing film, and then video was that technology.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny. My business had grown, and I had I had an association with a really good man who was owned, I think, 5 or 7 banks in Wisconsin. Ooh. And he was also a lawyer, and he was like a 5th generation Wisconsinite. Mm. I was, and my business were quite interesting to him as a novelty. And my employees would bank at his bank, and all the cash flow from the business would go through his banks and so on. And he said to me, so I'm investing in you because you're providing employment for Wisconsinites. But if you ever want to move the business to New York, because that's where the fashion business is, I'm not going to continue to back you.
Okay.
And that wasn't a threat. It was, part of the reason he invested was because he wanted to help Wisconsin businesses. At a certain point, I knew that I had to move to New York. I'm a stimulus junkie, for one thing. I just love walking the streets of New York and just the energy here. Initially, it was intimidating. And then it's where I had to be, and I felt like I just wanted to do something else, something different. I wanted to move to New York. That was the big difference. And friends of mine said, well, do you have anything lined up in New York? No. Do you have people there? No. Do you have a place to live? No. Well, do you have a job or something that you're going to do when you get there? No.
No.
And they said, well, aren't you afraid of what's going to happen if you move? And I said, actually, I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I don't move.
Yeah.
And so I did that and, negotiated the separation, with my financial backer. Had saved enough money that I traveled for about a year, traveled around the world for about a year. I was saleable in the clothing business. I was chosen one of the top 10 young designers in the United States. I always qualify that by saying I think there were only 8 of us, so it was easy to be in the top 10. And I was saleable there. So I had been approached to start another clothing company, which I did, and built that up and sold it to a German company that was looking to expand a base into the United States. But at that time, through one of the people I bought fabrics from, one of the owners of the company, his son was starting in the film business. And his father said to me, do you know much about the movie business? And I said, I mean, I've read some books, but no, I don't really know anything about it. And he said, well, you got a good head on your shoulders. You're a bright kid. You're the same age as my son. And he certainly is not going to listen to me. Would you mind meeting him? I said, no, I'd be happy to meet him. And I did. And he was a really nice guy. And so I found this is like in 1974 or something like that, 75. Okay. And so all of a sudden I'm working with Dennis Hopper and William Burroughs, who was like one of the cornerstones of the Beat Generation, a writer, and working on what was going to be a film. This was the screenplay based on Burroughs's book called Junkie. Okay. And Dennis and I got along really well, and Dennis wanted me to be in the movie. And I thought, oh, this is a blast. This is really cool. Yeah. Until it wasn't. And the part that wasn't so cool is that at that time, Dennis and Terry Southern, who wrote Magic Christian, he was another part of this group. They had, let's say, drug issues. Okay. And as did Burroughs, and nothing was getting done. They would get up at 4 PM, eat at around 6. Start getting high at around 10 and go to bed at around 6 AM. And the bloom was off the rose, but I found what they were doing intriguing. Yeah. And I consulted for the guy that brought me into this, the son of the fabric guy. And I said, they're going to squeeze you out of this. He said, what do you mean? I said, you licensed the rights to the book to make the film, right? Right. I said, they don't need you anymore. And they think they can do it. And he said, but it's mine. I said, well, you licensed it. And, I didn't say this was going to happen. That's what I think is going to happen. Sure enough, in 2 weeks or so, they said, we want to buy the option. And I said, what are they offering you? And it was like twice what he had paid. And I said, so you're doubling your money or tripling your money. I forget which it was. Within 6 months. Yeah. And it's not going to get made. And he said, what do you mean it's not going to get made? I said, these guys never leave the hotel room. They can't get anything done. Take the money. Yeah. You can always apply it to some other project. He did take the money. The film, you never saw me in a movie because the film was never made. That's the only offer I got. And, but I learned about filmmaking, and in the process met some other people in that world. And using my fashion knowledge, we became one of the first companies to start videoing and shooting fashion shows.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I made the transition into that. And once I got my first client, which was Halston, who was one of the most significant American designers, and then Ralph Lauren shortly thereafter. Yeah. And then my business just grew.
That is so cool. And the fact that you were in fashion before, I'm sure helped
you absolutely
with them, because they knew that you understood that industry.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I could talk to them and I could talk their language.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and as a matter of fact, you know, when I said to Halston, when I pitched the idea to him, I said, so where are you during your fashion show? And he said, well, I'm backstage. And I said, right. You're checking on the models before they go out. But how do you get any feedback in terms of how the show is received? And he says, well, my staff. And I said, well, your staff's all afraid of you. You know, nobody's going to tell you anything you don't want to hear. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting accurate feedback. But if I shot your show, you could have it to review. So you could look at it, see how it moved on the models, look at the audience's engagement with it, how they were responding to it. You could also play it in your lobby while people are waiting to see the line to buy it. And, you know, you could even put it on screens in Bloomingdale's and Saks Fifth Avenue and things like that. Well, he was smart enough and forward thinking enough that he saw, well, there's a lot of application for this.
Yeah.
And so he became my first client because he was such a high profile designer that got attention, and videoing his shows got attention. And it's become a major industry at this point. But, you know, I was one of the pioneers in that.
And you know what's so cool about that? Multi-purposing that film, just like people multi-purpose social media video now.
But so I actually learned, you're right, but I learned that lesson actually from my grandmother.
Okay,
because
so tell us, what'd she do?
My grandmother, we're calling it, you know, repurposing. And my grandmother, so we would have chicken dinner. Then she would make chicken soup and chicken salad from the leftovers.
Yeah.
So, you know, that chicken lasted the whole week. Mm-hmm. Between the main course of the chicken, then chicken salad, then chicken soup. And I realized, oh, you know, you can use the same thing and deliver it different ways.
Yeah.
And so that was my grandmother. So I learned that from her.
Oh, look, all of your film success is built on what you learned from your grandma.
Some of it, yes.
How did you meet Halston?
This is another good thing for your entrepreneurial listeners. I called him.
Oh, okay, just out of the blue.
Out of the blue, I called him and I was able to get him on the phone.
Wow.
And I, you know, knew what I wanted to say when I got him on the line to try to intrigue him. And so then he interested him enough that he invited me up. You know, whether you can get somebody on the phone now or whether you get somebody through email or through, I mean, LinkedIn has become something now where, you know, it's annoying. I must get 10 things a week of people, you know, telling me how to monetize with LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. And as soon as you connect, they send you a pitch. I'm just like, go away.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I try now telling from their message whether or not I'm even going to link in. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's ways to get to people, but you have to have a compelling reason for them to do it. Yeah. And so, you know, you always have to think about if I'm going to get a meeting with Halston, what do I hope to accomplish? And how do I address and recognize the needs that he has so that what I'm offering is something that he would want?
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the essence of selling. Too many times people, when they're pitching something, are only thinking about making the sale and closing the deal. But you really have to think about, well, what's in this for that person? Why would they want this? Do I solve a problem for them? Do I make something go faster for them? Does this increase their exposure? I mean, what is it that what I'm offering does that has an appeal to them?
Yeah.
And that's critical.
Yeah, because it's not about you, it's about them. And most people just blah, 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 talk about themselves, everything they've done, and the person's eyes are just rolling back in their head. So yeah, that's a great lesson.
Well, and the thing is that I think an essential part of business is listening. And that's certainly key in theater and film in terms of having successful collaborations. But then you think about, well, that's really important when you have your sales staff together with your product development staff. And, you know, what do we need? What's compelling? What do we have problems with? What do we need solved? What can solve those problems? How can we apply that and twist that so that it spins and works for a client? And so it's always thinking about opportunity, but you always have to attach that opportunity to a practical use for your buyer. What is it that they're looking for? What is it that, you know, what am I solving for them, making easier for them, making more fun for them, you know, whatever.
Yeah, because they're not just going to buy because you're a nice guy and wonderfully handsome and very well dressed.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you, and clearly a good bullshitter. So that's good.
Jeffrey, I love the class. Obviously, I've never been to your class at Parsons School of Design, but I have sat in on one of the video classes, like from a year or two ago, that you invited me to sit in on, and how you have successful creatives come into the classroom to actually talk with your students about their success and what they've learned and how they do it. And I want to tell you, now it may be different now, but even with my degree in accounting, you know, that's business. They didn't teach you business, like how to go out and be successful. They taught you like kind of the skills or whatever. But so you're doing something with that class that it may not be unique now because people may have copied you, but what you're doing is something that very few people, if anybody's doing it before.
Well, thank you. I mean, I always wondered, you know, what kind of class would appeal to me? What would I want? What would I want to know? You know, and what I'd want to know is, well, how do you make a living at this? I mean, it's incredible when you talk to even bright people and we're talking about their business, and I said, okay, so phone, cost, rent, inventory, you know, assessment and control, you know, billing software. I mean, you know, just all these different kinds of things where all of a sudden you're finding out it actually costs a lot of money just to open the door. And that has nothing yet to do with employees.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's your accounting and then your taxes. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into a small business. There's a ton of stuff that you have to do. And so I think that it's important that people realize that. And also, I want to break down the wall between people who consider themselves either creative but know nothing about business and don't want anything to do with it, or they consider themselves, well, you know, I'm not creative at all, but I know business.
Yeah.
They are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can fit very well hand in glove. That doesn't mean that if you're the creative, once you're generating enough revenue, that you don't bring in a person who can complement your talents or do the things that you don't want to do. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And that's really important. But business is, you know, it's a part of your survival. And, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a clue as to business and things fall through the cracks, or you don't realize, oh man, I didn't even figure that into my costs, you know, and that's not an uncommon story. You know, you're in trouble. So I think that learning those things, and that's why I want to expose the students to that, is learning about, so here's the real world, you know, and I'll give a quick plug, if I may, aside from my book, Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. It's got great wisdom from my guests, but it's embedded in a narrative, my narrative. But I also, if you go to B. Jeffrey Madoff on LinkedIn or on Instagram at A Creative Career, there's clips of my guests that I think you've seen them, you know.
Yeah, they're excellent. And the book is excellent as well. Do you have your book there that you can hold up? I have it, but I lent it to somebody and they haven't given it back. So
There it is. There,
Yeah.
you can see it, right?
Can't see it because it's so bright.
How's
The
that?
light. Yeah, that's better. That's a little better. But yeah, so it's called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas, right?
Available at all fine booksellers.
Yes. And it is excellent, y'all. It is excellent. Tell them
Thank you.
a few of the entrepreneurs that are featured in it. And these are people who have spoken it to his class, y'all. So
Uh, yes, Kathy Ireland, Tim Ferriss, Michael Arndt, who's Academy Award winning writer, Josh Sapan, who is the CEO of AMC Networks. He greenlit Mad Men and Breaking Bad, among other things.
oh wow.
Roy Wood Jr., who is the senior Black correspondent on The Daily Show, Daymond John, a lot of really amazing people.
Yeah, your students are so lucky. I imagine that they realize how lucky they are. But to be able to learn from people like that and to actually be in their presence and not only hear their story, but be able to interact with them and ask questions is amazing. That's invaluable.
Well, thank you. I love doing it. I've been doing it now for 15 years.
Wow.
And I love doing it because I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I will say that a character trait that is essential to me if I'm going to be around somebody for any length of time is curiosity.
Yeah.
A sense of humor, empathy, and intelligence to sort of weave it all together.
Yeah.
And, when I'm with the guests and I tell the students, and this is not just a platitude, I'm learning along with them. And that, and I love that, whether I'm having an astronomer on or an astronaut, which I have had.
Yeah, I sat in on the one with the astronaut. I was sitting here trying to remember. It was
Evan Ford. Yeah. Wasn't that a blast?
Yes, it was. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. And so, how often do you get to talk to an astronaut and somebody who has spent not only a year in space, but has been on the International Space Station?
Yeah.
And, I love it because I'm constantly learning and I find that fulfilling. That's fun for me.
Yeah. I love to learn. Also, my father was blind and he had what they call them talking books then, audio books that he would order from Library of Congress, and it would be albums and be a box that thick. And it would be anything from novels to documentaries, basically biographies and stuff. So every night when we were in bed, I could hear from the next room. He would stay up really late he was reading his books, and it just opened this huge world to me. And it's like I absorbed that curiosity from him, so I love that you are constantly learning, because there's so many people that it's like, they get to a certain point in life or even in high school and they're just not interested in learning anything new. They just are bored, and then they're boring.
Yeah. Isn't it great fun to be around somebody who thinks they know everything?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day, curiosity killed the cat. No, boredom would kill this cat.
Right. Yeah. Curiosity actually kept the cat agile and kept it.
Right. That's right.
And kept it learning. I never understood that. I did have teachers that would say to me, "You ask too many questions." And I said, well, that's how you learn, isn't it? Yeah. And then they didn't have an answer for that.
Well, and the irony with that is, by you asking questions, you were actually handing them an opportunity to teach more, but they didn't recognize it. Like the time you told me about when you were in, was it government or politics, that class? What?
Political science.
Yeah, political science. Tell the audience about that, because that's a really good example of somebody having blinders on and just thinking, this is what I'm doing and going straight for it.
Well, I will precede the story by saying that I either got along really well with my teachers or they didn't like me. I was a wise ass or a pain in the ass, or both. Pain in the ass because I was a wise ass. But it was the first day of class. It was political science course. As I mentioned, I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin. Madison was politically an extremely active campus when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And outside our window, there were tanks, National Guard, and state police.
Mm-hmm.
There had been one of the buildings, math research building, that had been blown up as part of a political, well, it was actually a lone person who did it, allegedly for political reasons. It was not a smart, good thing to do at all. But there were also riots against companies that were recruiting on campus that were supporting the Vietnam War. And so there was a lot of things, questions, and that sort of thing. And so when I saw the reading list, the most recent book was from like 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
And I said to the professor, right outside our window, there are tanks, there are soldiers. It's an armed camp. You're not giving us any of the tools to help us understand the world we're living in now. It doesn't make sense to me that the most recent book on our reading list is over 10 years old. And he said, well, Mr. Madoff, do you think you could teach the class better? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, why don't you come up here and do it? And I said, well, I'm not ready yet, but I'll be ready next week. And now, what, I'm a student like that in class. But by the way, I enjoy being challenged by students.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like it. I'm not some fountain of knowledge that they should drink from and never question. I mean,
yeah, and by them challenging you, you keep learning.
Exactly right. So that next week, I talked about what I was going to do. And I hadn't connected these dots before until somebody, when they were interviewing me, was talking to me about this, and it brought it up. So the first week of class, after I did the introduction to class, it was actually the second week of class, I had William Proxmire, who was a senator from Wisconsin, and very smart, very interesting guy on the national scene. Then I had Gaylord Nelson, the other senator from Wisconsin. Then I had the first Black who was a sheriff of a major city. And so I brought in all of these people that could speak to what was going on. And that professor brought the students who didn't come with me, which about half the class came with me. He would bring them in to listen to these people. And what I hadn't realized until just a few years ago is, wow, that's actually what I'm doing now with the teaching. I'm bringing in these people. I study about them so I can do an intelligent interview with them and honor their presence. Since they're giving me their time, I'm going to make it worth their while. And that's how I teach my class. Yeah. So it set the template 30 years before I started teaching, which is just kind of interesting.
That's so cool, but it's also so sad that, and I know it's too common, but just the fact that all this is going on outside the window, but the teacher has blinders on but it's like that in business, teaching, everything. Oh, yeah. Everybody's like, this is what we're doing, and no matter what, this is how we're going. We're not going to stray from it.
That's right. That's right. And everybody loses,
yeah.
Because that person is asleep, and they end up putting the students to sleep.
Yeah.
And, he actually tried to get back at me. We had made a deal that, this is interesting. When half the students decided to come with me, I said, before I say yes to this, we are not responsible for any of your papers. We're not responsible for any of your exams because we're not studying the same curriculum you are. And we agreed to that. Then the week before the final, he said, everybody in this class is responsible for the final exam. And I said, wait a minute. You said that because of this class and what we said, and agreed to, that we were not liable for your exams. He said, I said, as long as the class existed. Well, now I'm canceling the class.
Oh my gosh.
And so what that meant is that, you'd have to read the 5 books and do all this stuff within a week. That wasn't going to happen. But he was doing it not because he thought you'd learn something, but because he was vengeful.
Yeah, he wanted to punish you and the people that went with you.
That's right.
That's really sad.
So I said to him, well, I've got 30 witnesses to what you agreed to. And now you're just trying to get some vengeance. So let's go talk to the dean and we'll see whether or not we're all responsible for your final exam.
Mm-hmm.
And then he backed down and we didn't have to take it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Those are just important life lessons of standing up for yourself.
So true. And he could have learned so much from you, from all that experience, and I bet he learned nothing.
Well, I think it's kind of true with most people that are rigid like that. Mm-hmm. They don't learn anything. And what they try to do is, seek their vengeance somehow. So they want you to learn not to mess with them.
Yeah.
Not to question what they're doing, which is totally contrary to learning anything.
Yeah.
And you can be a rigorous and strict teacher. I'm not talking about that. Yeah. But if you don't leave a window open for exploration, without the oxygen, you suffocate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people aren't truly learning because they're not expanding their horizons. They're just memorizing.
That's right.
Okay, I've had you almost an hour. I thank you so much for being here. But before we go, I want you to tell everybody again how they can buy your book and how they can find out more about you and everything.
I will do that. Thank you. So my book is called Creative Careers. I'll get a visual aid here and try to make it so you can actually see it. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
How's that?
And I have, hold on a sec, I have my ebook up. That might show the.
So it's Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. Mm-hmm. Go to LinkedIn and you can see, very good.
Yes, that's what the cover looks like. Whoops.
And tilt it forward so it was glaring also.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Well, I can never figure out which way to go. There we go. Orange with all the little light bulbs, and then the one light bulb with the $ sign in it.
And my daughter designed the cover, which I love. Yeah.
Awesome.
When I told our publisher, Hachette, I said, I'm interested. I want my daughter. She's a graphic designer, and I said I want her I want my daughter to put in some submissions for the cover art. And I could see them going, oh, God. And I said, no, she's really talented. I'll send you her portfolio and you don't have to use it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what ended up getting used. So that was cool. Anyhow, you can also find me on LinkedIn. You've got my name there with doesn't have my first initial, which is B.
Mm-hmm. And y'all know the EREY and 2 F's on the end of Madoff.
That's yes, it's REY. Somebody did recently put EREY, but it's actually the way you spelled it, the way it's spelled there.
Right.
And so on LinkedIn, you can see the postings from guests in my class, which I think you'd enjoy. Mm-hmm. And you can go to @a creative career, and you can see quotes from the guests in my class and some of the discussion. There is a website, which is www at a creative career. Sorry.
Yeah, not at. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Instagram is a creative career. Screwed that up. And you can go to Madoff Enterprises and you can see my video work.
Okay.
And same with Instagram, Madoff Enterprises. And then something that I do, as I mentioned, I love walking around New York and I'm a stimulus junkie. And so I take pictures every day as I walk New York and I post them. They're all in black and white and I really enjoy doing it. You can see that it's on Instagram, Jeff_Madoff.
Okay. I didn't know that. I had already I always go look at a creative career, but I didn't realize that you had those photographs under that. So I need to start following that.
Oh, good. Yeah, they're fun. Well, this has been great. I've, as always, Lisa, enjoy speaking with you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on and being so gracious with your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
Goodbye.